Hey everybody, it's Deb Luttrell with Stitchin Heaven, and I'm here to show you a wonderful pattern. You've heard the term easy peasy. Well, that's what this one is. This pattern is called Waltzing My Tilda. And let me just tell you a little bit about how this came about. We've got these gorgeous fabrics in, that was my iron, from a company called Tilda. Tilda is a company out of Australia. I have loved her fabrics from the very beginning. And they're the kind of fabrics that you're like, oh, I love these fabrics, but what do I do with them? So what I wanted to do is I wanted to get a pattern that we could use with primarily Tilda to show off these beautiful fabrics. But I found in making this quilt that it is just a great all-around quilt to show any collection that you have, primarily dark fabrics and medium fabrics that you can put some lights with. And it's just very, very versatile and extremely easy. You can't believe how easy this is going to be to go together. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to just walk you through this pattern, and I'm going to show you a couple of tricks, a couple of tips, a couple of techniques, and hopefully at the end you'll be very pleased with what we've done here today. I'm going to show you a couple of rulers today. One of the rulers I'm going to show you is the folded corner clipper from Creative Grid Rulers. And then I'm also going to be using a new technique, or not a new technique, but kind of a cool technique that you may not know, just using a square ruler. So let's get started. Okay, so first of all, in this quilt, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to get a bunch of different fabrics. We have used, let's see, 28 fat quarters is what we've used in this quilt. And this quilt size is 56 by 64. You can make it as big as you want. Don't feel like you have to be limited to that. But for this size quilt, you're going to need 28 fat eighths, not fat quarters, I think I said. Or you're going to have scraps to total 3 yards, if that helps you, if you're just going to pull scraps out of your sewing room. So what you're going to do is you're going to cut yourself some 2.5-inch strips. And what you want to end up with are 2.5 by 10.5-inch strips like these. That's what we start with. And then you're also going to be cutting your lights. Now in this particular quilt, I just have a variety of tone-on-tone lights. They've got some grays in them. You know, get enough color of some sort in there so that it's not just white boring. And so it'll be interesting when you get your quilt finished. Now, you're also going to have from your fabrics some 2.5-inch squares. So we've got a variety of 2.5-inch squares here. Let's see, we need 112 4.5-inch squares, and we're going to need 2.5-inch squares. You're going to need 112 of these cut from your fabrics. So that's basically what you need to do this. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to make these the white blocks that you see on the quilt, and they're made just from a 4-patch with some corner snowball type corners. So what I'm going to do, first of all, let me sew these together. And just real quick, this is a very, very easy, quick quilt. I actually made this quilt at a retreat that I went to, and I finished it in just a couple of days. So you will be very pleased with how quickly this goes together. All right, so I made these 2 pieces here, and then we're going to sew these together. I'm a big fan of pressing, and I also am a big fan of pressing seams open. All right. Now, one thing I have learned about pressing seams open, if you will set your seam first like this, and then turn it and press it open, it presses open much easier. Okay, so once you have those pressed open, you're going to match up your seams. Now you can put a pin here if you are not comfortable that this seam is going to match. And most of the time I will, just because I want it to match up there in the center. And a lot of people say, okay, Deb, why do you like to press seams open? I've just learned over the years that I don't like to try to figure out what's going to nest and what's not going to nest, which is what you do when you press your seams to the side. If I press them open, I don't have to make that decision. I can turn my block any way, anytime, anyhow, and it will work. So this is the first step. We make a 4-patch. All right, so we've got our beautiful 4-patch here. Now I'm going to show you something. I believe the pattern calls to take your 2.5-inch square and put it in a corner, okay, and draw a line, which you know, traditionally you would draw a line from corner to corner, and you would sew on that line, press it back, and then you would trim a 1/4 inch away. That is a great way to do this, but I have discovered the folded corner clipper from Creative Grids, and I love to use this, and this is why. I can place this on here. I hate to draw lines. I can place this on here just like this, where the line would normally be drawn from corner to corner, and I can go ahead and cut this away. All right, and then I can take this to my machine just like this, use my 1/4 inch foot, sew from corner to corner, press it, and I'm done. I don't have to draw the lines, and I don't have to go back and cut away all those pieces. You've got quite a few corners here to work with, and so, you know, I'm all about easy peasy, quick, quick, quick. And so this is the method I prefer. And it has a 2.5 inch indicator on there to help you. So I'm going to do this one. And also when I'm working on this, I would do all of these at once. So I'd get this all set up, and then I would just go and chain piece these. The other way you could do this is to do this putting the corners on before you construct your 4-patch. Either way is just fine. You just want to make sure that all 4 corners are different. It's best. If you do happen to pick up the same fabric and you sew it, don't rip it out. It's not that big of a deal. But if you can make sure your 4 corners are different, that would be best. Okay. And with a fabric like this, honestly, there's so much going on the fabrics that if you get one that's like the last one you sewed, it's probably not going to matter that much. You're probably not even going to be able to tell that it's the same one. Okay. All right, so I've done all my corners. I'm going to take it over now, and I'm going to set my seams, and then I'm going to press these back. I think I'm going to make 28 of these, so you can see how fast that went together. So I'm just going to repeat that until I get all 28 of these done. And so I'm done with that block. Now we need to move on to the patchwork blocks. And the way we make these is we take these strips that are 2.5 by 10.5 inches. Again, make sure that no two strips are the same. So I'm going to take these 4 strips right here. And I'm going to make a strip set, what's called a strip set. A strip set is just when you sew strips together into a set. So we're going to do that first. This goes so incredibly fast. Now, I could have written this pattern in a way that you just sew a bunch of long fabric, the whole fabric width together, and you made these strip sets. I wrote it to where you use 10.5 inch strips because I want you to be able to have a lot of variety. If you were to use strip sets with a full length of fabric, or even a half of the length of fabric, 21 inches, you wouldn't get near the variety that you can get if you use the 10.5 inch strips. So that's the purpose of me having you cut them down into 10.5 inch strips. All right. Okay, once you get your strip set done, like this, you're going to do this for all of your pieced blocks. You're going to set your seams. I don't know if you guys have your favorite iron. I love these reliable irons, particularly the ones they're making now. These are called vapor generators, and man, oh man, they get hot and they do generate a lot of steam. I love sewing with steam. I think it sets my fabric a lot better. I know some people don't, but I do. So you're gonna set your seams, and then you're gonna come back. You're gonna very easily just be able to catch that right there and press this open. Again, if you're a fan of pressing them to the side, you can do that on this pattern. This is left up to the individual preference. It just doesn't take that much longer to press them open. And like I said, I have more flexibility when I press my seams open. Okay? All right, now we're going to cut this into 2.5 inch segments. And what you want to do, I usually line mine up on my mat, and I trim off. If you have just a standard ruler like this one, you can just trim off this end to straighten this up. A word of caution though, don't trim more than just a sliver, because if you do, you won't have enough length to get the number of cuts that you need out of this piece. So cut off a sliver, and then you cut this into 2.5 inch segments. Now let me show you a little thing about Creative Grid rulers. Your Creative Grid ruler, some people get confused because they say, well, I don't know if it's that number or if it's this number. Your Creative Grid rulers are correct when your numbers are looking at you. So just remember that. If your numbers aren't looking at you, you don't use that number. So this is, I'm trying to get 2.5. So this is 1, 2, 1.5 right here. And there's also a 2.5 inch mark that I can also use to make sure that I'm cutting the right place. So that's just a little tip about Creative Grid rulers. I love them just because they're no slip and they're wonderful, accurate rulers. But what I'm going to show you with this is a little trick that I learned here a while back. And when you're cutting a segment like this, you can cut 2.5. So I know this is 2.5 because my numbers are looking at me. And there's the half line right there. And instead of picking my fabric up, I can move to the next 2.5 inch set measurement, which is 5. And so I cut 5. Then I cut 7.5 because that's 5 plus 2.5 is 7.5. And then I'm going to cut 10. See how I don't have much left over? That's why I wanted to caution you about just using a sliver on that end. Because if you cut too much, you won't have enough. So once I do that, voila, looky here, I have all of these cut into 2.5 inch pieces. How cool is that? All right, so we've got that done. Now, I've got some more over here. What I want you to do is go through and do all of your fabrics like this so that you have a bunch of these. And then you're going to be mixing these up all however you can. Just make it as scrappy as possible. So we're going to sew 2 together. And then we're going to sew 2 more together. So you're going to sew 4 together. Make another strip set. Again, if you feel like you want to pin, you can. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. A minute ago I think I said I do. Sometimes I do. I'm not going to pin on this one. Just line up your edges and then you can go. I just make sure when I'm sewing that I hold that piece. You see, I can tell that that lines up. All right, there's that one. Now, and y'all, I want to tell you, this machine I'm sewing on is a 590, Bernina 590. What I love about this machine, looky here, when I want a chain piece, this presser foot raises just a little bit so that I can get my fabric under it without having to raise the presser foot. You know what I'm saying? It's a hover feature that this machine has. This is just a remarkable machine. It has a beautiful, beautiful stitch. It also has a thread cutter, and then I can use the cutter on the side of my machine to cut my pieces apart. And I'm going to do this way. Check it just to make sure I'm lining up. Lower my presser foot. And this gal wants to go. Now, one of the things if you do choose to press your seams open, you need to take care to make sure that when you are sewing, the seam stays open on the underside. It's real easy to get that to where it wants to fold under, and if that happens, don't rip it out. Just kind of press over it. It'll be okay. So, all right. So there is our block. Now look at this. I sewed two of the same fabrics together. You know what? From the back of a galloping horse, nobody's going to see that, and it is not going to matter. So do not take that out, please. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to set our seam. Set our seam again. Set our seam. And then press open. See how easily that presses open once you get it started? You just use the tip of your iron, and there it goes. I actually kind of wished I had sewn one of these where that seam turns under so I could show you. It doesn't matter. You just kind of press over it, and you can hardly tell. It's okay. Don't worry. Be happy. All right. Usually when I finish with a block like this, then I will take some of my Best Press or starch, and I will give it a spray of starch, just because I like my blocks to be very nice and crisp before I start to sew them together. Okay? All right, so these are your two blocks. This is it. This is all that you have to do for this quilt. Now, what happened to me when I started putting this together was I started sewing these. I had them in two piles, and I started sewing them two together, two together, two together, two together. And then I sewed four together, okay? And I had 8. Well, this quilt is only 7 blocks across. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I'm sitting here thinking, well, darn it, I'm going to have to go through and I'm going to have to rip out every one of those. And my friend Tiffany was across from me, and she said, no, 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 you don't have to do that. She said, what you need to do is assemble this vertical instead of horizontal. And she was right. And so, because this is a 7 block by 8 block, so traditionally, you know, we know that we had to assemble our quilts horizontal. Well, you don't. In this particular quilt, you sew 2 together, then you sew 4 together to make a row of 8, and then you're going to assemble this vertically. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Is that cool or what? Yeah. So it's just that easy, you guys. Then I assembled it, we quilted it, and we have a beautiful sample here of how to use Tilda fabrics. And this is where the name comes, Waltzing My Tilda. So look, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope that if you have any questions, leave the questions in comments, and we will be happy to answer them for you. This is Deb Luttrell with Stitchin Heaven. I hope you enjoyed watching this video as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.